quiet. I like that.
Quiet's always good. I'm just glad to get the election.
No, Martian, just killing me.
My wife was so mad.
Thanks for waiting. We're waiting for our attorney, and he just landed, so we'll be about to. I don't know. What's that? I know. It was good. It was beautiful. Yeah.
20 down.
Breezy at the end, but it was nice.
Great.
It was nice.
It's Monday.
Oh, I'll get some in a minute. Okay, I'll call the order of the Regional Transportation Commission meeting of October 22nd with a roll call, please.
Neil Jordan. Paul McKenzie. Bob Lucy. Ron Smith.
Here.
Lee Gibson.
Here.
Dale Ferguson.
Here.
And Rudy Malfabon. Thank you. We have a quorum.
Okay, if you'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Mr. McKenzie, would you lead us?
I just want to get out of your way. Maybe.
Please join me in pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, number one, approval of the agenda. Anybody want to pull anything? Okay, looking for a motion?
So moved, sir.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, I'm going to open up the public comment period. I have one card. Anybody in the audience that wishes to speak, would you please fill out a card, and then we'll get you up on the at the microphone. First is Tammy Hoskill. Did I say that right? Holt. Welcome, Tammy.
Tammy Holtstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee, for the record. It's my first time being before this board. We are here because of some information that came out during a Washoe County board meeting when one of the commissioners was wheeling and dealing with a resident regarding, or developer regarding elevation of Lemon Drive. For those of you that don't know, Lemon Valley and Lemon Drive has been an issue for the last 2 years with our flooding. The water, again, is still there. That's why I'm here. So my concern is that working with, the commissioner was speaking to Washoe County staff and was kind of get Washoe County staff to say that this road was going to be developed sooner than later, and was basing that on the reason why they were going to approve this development, because of this road being elevated. Now, my question is, with RTC and this commissioner actually being part of this board, how is it that he has the authority to try and get that kind of conversation going when speaking with some of your RTC staff that not until 2019 is there even going to be any renderings for a conception of how Lemon Drive is going to be elevated before drawings and engineering could be done. So my question is, how does this happen, and why is it that Washoe County seems to think that they can twist people's arms? And are you going to allow that? I have my concerns about the situation. Of course, the project doesn't meet the master plan, and the Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee, the residents of Lemon Valley, and myself have filed a judicial review on that project because it does not meet the master plan, and that whole area is a floodplain, so those are situations that need to be brought up. Also, the other thing that I'm concerned about is Lemon Drive from Palace up to Sky Vista, up to Sky Vista or Buck. There's areas with this new ditch that has narrowed the road. There's no pedestrian walkway, there's no bicycle right-of-way, and it's narrowed because of this new development that they did for the ditch. So is RTC happy about that also? Doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, and I think that there's a lot of different things happening that need to be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Brian, could you get with Tammy maybe after the meeting and deal with some of her questions? Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the audience wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. Moving on to consent items, number 3. Anybody want to pull a consent item? Okay, looking for a motion? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Move on to 4.1, which is the director's report. Lee?
Mr. Chair, on Thursday, October 25th, we are going to host the Transforming Virginia Street event, Taste and Treats at the South Virginia Plaza from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. This is a free event that will celebrate our continuing construction progress on Virginia Street and encourage the continued community patronage of the businesses in Midtown during construction. So that's another fun event to celebrate our long-awaited construction endeavors. I also want to point out that on Election Day, Tuesday, November 6th, there will be free rides on all RTC transit services for purposes of voting. This is our annual partnership with the Washoe County Registrar of Voters, and we were certainly pleased to be able to provide free rides on that most important day. The 4th Annual Nevada Veterans Memorial Plaza Benefit Dinner is going to be held on Thursday, November 8th at the Nugget Casino. Individual and table ticket sales are still available, can be purchased online at nvmp.info, and this event will begin at 6 p.m. We are also still going through the new transit service update, and we are still, as you've seen in some of the reports we've brought to the commission, have some issues. MV is still working and training and hiring operators, but it's still a very tight labor market out there, and everybody is doing their best they can. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions or comments for Lee? Seeing none, we'll move on to the federal report. Mr. Gibson.
Mr. Chairman, the federal report is in the backup this time. The Transportation Appropriations Committee is now getting a continuing resolution, or working under a continuing resolution until December 7th. That's good for us because that keeps all of our funds flowing through here. We also have a number of requests for comments coming in, and then there was a Senate hearing on emerging technologies that Senator Cortez Masto highlighted our work with the with the University of Nevada, Reno on autonomous bus technology. And we're continuing to work with the Federal Transit Administration and slogging through the capital investment grant requirements. We have a risk assessment scheduled for the 14th and 15th of November. That'll probably be something we talk a little bit about under the Virginia Street item, but nonetheless, we're still following the roadmap and moving towards our grant agreement in the springtime for Virginia Street. So with that, Mr. Chairman, you do have a written report from the lobbying team, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the NDOT monthly update. Mr. Malvabon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be really brief since we have several NDOT presentations today. Wanted to mention that NDOT completed all of the consent decree requirements with the US EPA, and we've been that's been terminated. That consent decree has been terminated by the courts as of September. So that's good news for NDOT. We've got our stormwater program in place, and a lot of staff and a lot of equipment. As Lee mentioned, we're funded through December 7th, and they'll pass the appropriations for surface transportation soon, after the elections. Exciting time with these elections. And then I just wanted to mention that we are proceeding with acquiring a consultant engineering company for the North Valleys project that we anticipate in a couple of years. And also you'll receive a lot of good information on the status of other major NDOT projects. Thanks.
Is that it? Questions or comments? Ms. Jordan?
Thank you very much. I did want to take this opportunity to thank NDOT for their continued work in keeping the roadways and the underpasses clear near the downtown exits of Reno. I don't know if you all recall, it was probably about a year and a half ago when they were pretty gnarly, and there was a lot of trash and a lot of activity that we were struggling with to maintain its cleanliness and security and safety. I saw a crew out this morning maintaining it again. It's kind of one of those things that you don't notice it anymore because it's gone. But I did want to just send a thank you out for keeping that area clean and safe, particularly as people enter our downtown. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Good stuff. They're cleaning it up all over, that's for sure. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Lucy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Malfabon, I want to thank you for the time and effort you have put in for the Melrose study. I know you guys received that study back, and that we are planning a joint forum, community forum with your staff and Washoe County staff to address all the safety concerns up and down the Mount Rose corridor. Hopefully that meeting will be coming in the next couple weeks, sometime mid-November, is what I've been told it will be. So I want to thank you for putting all that time and effort into that. I know the citizens have been very concerned with that, so thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Rudy, appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to number 5.1, acknowledge the receipt of a bus stop improvement program update. Is that going to be Ed? Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Ed Park, and I'm a transit planner with the RTC. My primary responsibilities are bus stops as well as fares and performance statistics. I'm making a presentation of the RTC Transit bus stop connectivity and improvement project, and I'm providing an update for the board. Some background information: the Americans with Disabilities Act standards for bus stops. What that means is that we have to comply, we try to comply as best we can with the standards for ADA. And the ADA standards for transportation facilities, section 810.2, requires a firm, stable surface measuring 5 feet along the curb and 8 feet deep. And we did a study using a UNR intern of all of our bus stops. It says 55% up there. I had to do a recalculation. It's actually 61%. So 61% of all RTC bus stops do not meet the standard of the 5x8 platform. So this is something that we are seriously going to take a look at and trying to improve with all the remaining 61% of the bus stops. The RTC Public Transportation and Operations Department, Planning Department, and Engineering Department are all working together to issue an RFP for the Commission for approval in November for the bus stop connectivity and improvement program. The bus stop connectivity improvement project is anticipated to be a 2-year project with construction starting next year. The RTC has identified about 100 stops right now with adequate public right-of-way and sufficient ridership to qualify for immediate consideration for improvements. And among these there's 2 stops along Charlins. One of the stops across Charlins Terrace Apartments has sufficient public right-of-way, and a pad can be built at that location, so we will be working on that. That would be one of the immediate priorities. There's a stop also on Charlins and Robb. Unfortunately, it does not have public right-of-way and would require building sidewalk access along that strip. And that would require some work. I believe that Renown owns that property, and we would have to work closely with them to provide sidewalk access as well as a bus pad. Next. The RTC will further evaluate each stop for feasibility and cost efficiency. So it may not be the full 100, it would be, you know, the subset of that. The improvement costs per stop are anticipated to be around $10,000 to $20,000, depending on sidewalk needs, landscaping, and other unforeseen obstacles. In FY 2018, the RTC improved 3 bus stops and relocated 1 rapid enhanced station. And the reason for that being that the station was located not on public right-of-way, but actually private property. So in situations like that, we request a letter of understanding with the private property owner. And as you can understand, a lot of times they simply refuse. You know, we don't provide them any compensation. You know, it's purely an act of charity for them and interest in helping the community. And in that particular situation, the property owner simply decided that it was no longer in their best interest to have that station on their property. And so we had to simply relocate it. And that is one major reason why we try to find locations for bus pads that are in public right-of-way. Using an UNR intern, the RTC previously inventoried 183 bus stops for ADA compliance. And then the RTC is concurrently updating our ADA transition plan with the help of consultant Kimley Horn that will review accessibility of all RTC facilities. And they have budgeted 360 bus stops to review and inventory for ADA accessibility. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments? Ms. Jordan?
Thank you very much. So the locations, particularly ones that we have kind of highlighted as priority ones, we will, if we need to get some private approval, we'll still approach them for that, like Renown? I can't imagine they would oppose it.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay.
In cases like that, we will approach the private property owners.
Okay, so we won't push those to the bottom of the pile. We will still coordinate with the property owners to get those done, right?
Right, for stops that we have identified as that definitely needing ADA accessibility improvements and prioritizing those stops, we will definitely make our best attempt to contact the private property owners. But the remaining stops on the list, we've simply identified as being in public right-of-way that we can immediately improve on. And absolutely further down the road, and hopefully the funding will continue for this, we will address all the stops in the system, and many of those are on private property.
And as part of this improvement, it includes at the bare minimum a bench?
Well, what we would do is build a bus stop pad at the location, and then depending on ridership, yes, you know, if the ridership is sufficient, we would build a shelter, and then a little bit lower than that, we would put a bench out there, and then depending on the need, amenities like trash cans, things like that.
Okay, so ridership drives the amenity augmentation, is that what you're telling me?
Right, absolutely.
Okay, so can we talk about Valley and Denslow, which I understand to be one of the higher ridership locations in our region that has a bench but no shelter?
Okay, Valley and Denslow.
So maybe we needed that evaluation. Maybe we can get that back kind of where they are in a ranking and what they might get based upon their ridership and when.
I think you're going to bring this back next month, aren't you? Are you bringing this item back next month?
I can if you would like, yeah.
I would like, because I think we did, how many improvements last year? Commissioner Lucy, I think, said 3.
Just 3.
So we might be 140 years old by the time these
Yeah.
all get done?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be a little bit older than that, but.
Yeah. 142.
Any other, Mr. Lucy?
Mr. Park, now you said in your presentation that you've identified 100 stops. Is that 100 stops, is that representative of that 61%? Or how many stops physically are identified in that 61%?
There are approximately 1,000, I believe, 1,060 stops. So, you know, somewhere north of 600 stops.
So 600 stops are not in compliance, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Physically.
And the 100 that we have identified are a subset of those 600 that are not in compliance.
Those are and those 100 have the public right-of-way that we have with significant ridership that we could identify quickly.
Correct.
Now, maybe you can answer this, or Mr. Stewart can answer this. If we start this project, what are we anticipating? How many stops are we anticipating to improve in a year's time?
Well, this particular project, we anticipate to be about a 2-year project that'll go out and then start construction next year. And we have identified the 100, so it would be something less than 100. But as far as like in the future, it would depend on budgeting and funding.
Well, yeah, funding. But so over the next 2 years, we're anticipating to do at least to try to get the at least 100 that have the public right away improved?
Correct.
That's the anticipation? Okay. And then what would we, Mr. Stewart, when we shut those bus stops down, for those improvements, do we relocate the bus stop? Do we move it to another site? Does that, because obviously these are going to be high transit ridership areas. What do we do with those stops?
Yeah, Brian Stewart, Director of Engineering. Good morning. Yeah, what we do is we work with transit and try to find a temporary location where the bus can stop and the riders can participate in being able to load and offload safely while the new construction happens.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. McKenzie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I noticed specifically in my ward that there's been a number of new developments have come in that haven't built a bus stop to the standard that we're saying we've got to upgrade them to now. And I just can't stress enough, our planning department, when we have development come in, we need to make sure that they give us a bus stop that's got the amenities. It's not a sign stuck in the ground out on the dirt pathway. That's one of my biggest pet peeves is that we go in there and do everything else, and then we stick a sign out there a mile away from everything and expect people to walk down dirt pathways to get to a bus stop along a high-traffic road.
Mr. McKenzie, Commissioner McKenzie, David Jickling, Director of Public Transportation and Operations. We absolutely agree with you 100%, and what I can assure you is every single project built in any jurisdiction that is on a bus route, we request an ADA pad. All we can do is request it. So if it doesn't get built, something's falling through the cracks in the local jurisdictional level, but we absolutely request those.
For me, I know we budgeted, I thought $2 million to take care of these bus stops. $1.2 million. I think at that meeting, we indicated that we need to bite the bullet and get these things done. The sooner, the better. We do have people, whether there's 2 people at a bus stop or 20 people at a bus stop that are standing in the mud or in the street to stay out of the mud. So for me, whatever it takes to get these things done, expedited. So if you could come back in November, and if you need additional funds, let us know so we can discuss it as a board.
Yeah, we'll be in November with, we hope, an RFP for you to approve, and we can address the shelter and other issues as well at that time. The funding right now isn't so much the issue as much as just the labor out there.
And that's true. That's true with everybody. I get that.
It's going to take some time. Where your funding is very generous, and if we can keep that going, we're going to tackle this in the next few years.
And $10,000 to $20,000 per stop. That seems big range in there. What are we talking about?
Well, a typical pad would be about $5,000 if that's all we have to do. And we're, part of our work right now is going to determine that.
So a 5x8 pad, 5x8 is $5,000.
By the time we get everybody out there and get it all installed, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go in the cement business. Did you have another question? Okay. Ms. Jordan?
Thank you very much. I had a recent incident too, I believe it was up off of 7th Street, where we had a couple, where's Michael? Was it 7th Street? Sky Vista, where because of our high winds and just increased population, there is an increase of trash. And that trash blows around and makes our neighborhoods look horrible, and then we have to send our city staffs out to do cleanups and that sort of thing. Do we put trash cans in as an automatic as part of this? Like, I kind of feel like the pad, the bench, the trash can should be automatics, right?
We agree with you. One of the things we're discovering, though, is when we put out trash cans, they get used by the neighborhoods. We have stops where we know we only have 1 or 2 boardings a day, and yet that trash can's getting filled up on a daily basis. So our dilemma is, there's a trash problem in the community, to be sure, and every stop we put a trash can at, all of a sudden we're getting trash that we're not convinced is attributed to our passengers. But of course, all the trash around a bus stop is always going to be blamed on the passengers. That's a dilemma, but we certainly can do that. Right now, our facilities maintenance folks are asking about, do we need, and we're looking at our RFP that's out on the street right now, a trash truck to handle the trash. We literally are pulling tons of trash a week. And we just don't believe, when we look at the type of trash, that it's all associated with our
Well,
patrons.
I guess I'll play devil's advocate and say, okay, then we should be better trash partners in the community, and even if somebody's bringing their trash, whatever, I mean, it's going to end up somewhere and likely going to be on the sidewalk or the street,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a problem. So I just know we've kind of come in after the fact and put in trash cans, and it's got to be more cost-effective to put it in on the front end. And maybe if a trash truck is the answer, then maybe we do need to look at that. But it seems odd to me to have a bus stop without a trash can, because inevitably somebody has a water bottle or a cup
Yeah,
or
I agree.
some sort of trash can. Thank you.
And just to clarify, Chairman Smith, the $2 million figure that you were recalling, so we have about $1.2 million for the actual construction work. We have about $800,000 that covers shelters, benches,
Okay.
solar lightings, things like
Okay.
that.
Well, I'm glad to see that we're finally moving forward on this. It's taken quite a while to do this, so I'd like to see it done as quickly as possible. Any other questions or comments? Okay, looking for a motion to accept the report? So moved. Second. We have, let me see, 18 motions in 1 second, so. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thanks, Ed, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Move on to 6.1, acknowledge receipt of the 4th Street Parade Away monthly progress report. Warren, come on down.
Good morning, Commissioners. Warren Call, RTC Project Manager for the 4th and Prater BRT project, here to give you a construction update. The project status right now, we're currently at 114.8% of the contract time. The roadway work is substantially complete, and the BRT scope is still under construction at this time. Concerning the budget, the contract value of $42.3 million, the contractors earned about $38.5 million to date. Construction activities over the past month, utility work, Tumwa water main work is, we're doing punch list work on that. The Reno dry utility work, we got street lights connections, traffic signals, we're doing fiber optic connections, and then starting the punch list work as well. In Sparks, the dry utility workers, we're doing the punch list work in Sparks as well as Reno. Leading into the civil improvements, we put in a crosswalk right there at 18th Street, so that's completed. Then the final concrete work in West Reno is underway. Paving West Reno is pretty much done. Landscape installation ongoing, and punch list throughout Sparks and East Reno is going on. For the BRT stops, the roof structures at 15th Street westbound BRT stop is completed, and that's the mock-up station. PCC paving in front of the stations is completed. And outreach, we have outreach when we're doing the paving in Reno. We're starting the closeout coordination with NDOT, Sparks, and Reno as well, and preparing an outreach regarding the grand opening of the stations and the project as well. Planned construction for the activities of the next month into November. We have the Reno work, which is your BRT construction at Gleddy and Sutro, and the ongoing punch list work. Sparks work will be the BRT stations at 15th Street and El Rancho, and again, the punch list work is ongoing there as well. Upcoming traffic control, the project is open to two-way traffic, but during the punch list work and the BRT station work, there'll be isolated and intermittent lane shifts to take place during those activities. Having said that, is there any questions or discussions?
Questions or comments? Seeing none, looking for a motion to accept the report. So moved. Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thanks, Warren.
Thank you.
Okay, 6.2, acknowledge receipt of the Virginia Street Bus Rapid Transit extension. Jeff? Welcome, Jeff.
Good morning. Jeff Wilbert, project manager for the Virginia Street project. So I'll give you the kind of monthly update of how the project's been going on, and then as Mr. Gibson said earlier, I can give you an update of the risk assessment and the FTA aspects of the project that we're working through. So the project's still kind of, is still underway. We're about 31 days into the project. That's about a quarter of the total working days. That puts us on schedule for the completion towards the end of February. We are working through the 90% roadway design. We had all our comments. We've given all those comments back to the design engineer, and now we're working through to kind of come up with the CMAR cost estimate. So we're going to do an opinion of probable construction cost. We're expected to get that early November, and have a kind of a revised budget of what the project's ultimately going to cost. You can see kind of in a couple photos here, this is the joint trench and some other storm drain work that we're doing. You can see we're putting in lots and lots of conduits in the ground. They're just a noodle mess. So the joint utility trench, I do have a video that I can show you that we did. That's kind of a cool outreach video. We'll let that play. There might be sound, I don't know. Okay. More involved in this video. And so that video is mostly of the joint trench, so you can see what it kind of looks like. One of the things that we're really trying to do is explain to the, as part of our outreach, is what exactly the joint trench is. And we're doing all this work, but no one's really seeing any of the improvements because they're all underground. So that was a good outreach item to help demonstrate that. The contractor did add a 5th crew, so that crew is kind of going through and proofing all those conduits. So now that they're all installed, we need to go double check to make sure that they're whole and that they're going to be usable by all the utility companies. And we're still working with a lot of the tumwall work throughout the corridor, and then we're starting storm drain work down in the south end by Plum Lane. And so now that the joint utility trench is pretty much complete, we're working on it up towards Liberty, but the rest of it's done. We're starting to do those stems off of it. So those are service laterals that go to make the connections to the for all the utilities. Storm drain work, water work, upcoming traffic control. So we are doing work right now in the Liberty intersection, and that's to cross to get, there's a big fiber optic hub just by the Starbucks there. So we're doing some connections for AT&T and for MCI in that area. Temporary traffic control, we're still keeping the southbound detour. We're detouring, or sorry, southbound through traffic and detouring the northbound route. As also was discussed by Mr. Gibson, some of our monthly events. So we do have the Taste and Treats event that's on the 25th. And that's gonna be a really cool event where we just, kind of help spur and get people into that South Virginia Plaza. That's where the Portofino's is and Sushi Pier's at. And what it's gonna be is you're gonna get a card and you're gonna be able to go to all of the it's like a wine walk almost with food and drinks and all those kinds of things. And at the end, we're gonna do a raffle and give off people that don't have those service activities. So Sports West doesn't really have anything to offer in a Taste and Treats type environment, but we'll buy a gift card from them, and participants of the Taste and Treats event will be able to win that. So it'll be a cool thing. And we've done lots of meetings, always communicating with the public as much as possible, answering any questions that people have. I do have a couple other items before I conclude. So we did last month, you guys kind of asked about security. After the meeting last month, we did have a meeting with the Midtown Business Association, and we talked to them about security. The City of Reno Police Chief showed up. It was a pretty good meeting. The Police Chief had lots of good comments to kind of share, and neighborhood watch ideas. Lots of ideas kind of came together. But really, the other thing that happened over the last month is they caught the robbers. And so since then, it's kind of really trailed off. I can talk through, if you'd like, about what security activities the contractor does. Do you want to, so really what's part of the contractor's scope is they're really there to, they're going to provide security and safety systems to protect their investments, their assets. So anywhere where they have equipment staged, material staged, they're going to fence those areas, protect their assets so that they're not subject to vandalism, theft, any of that kind of stuff. Really, and then they're present, so during the entire day, there's people in the corridor that are, keeping an eye out. So anywhere that a security need would be, lacking or missing would be in those off hours. So from like 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. or something in that time frame. And so we did look at a couple different things. Having a full-time security officer, we have a weekly rate for that if we want to pursue that kind of route. Another idea that's kind of maybe in between is like just a person going through, on random intervals and just kind of checking in on stuff. The difference here is that, we can't be policing for the community. We can police or check for what our project is impacting. So, and a lot of that's focused around the contractor. So anywhere the contractor has equipment, facilities, staging areas, that kind of stuff, it makes a lot of sense for us to participate in that manner. The other thing that I want to talk about was the FTA side of the project. So over the last month, we've been doing so much work with the FTA, getting all these packets and bits of information together about scope, schedule, budget, and just all in preparation of this risk assessment. So what they're going to do is November 14th and 15th, they're going to come and talk to us about risk, and they talked about the scope, talked about cost. How are all these things adding up to come to a FTA accredited project? And so that's going to be a big ordeal. It's going to be a ton of fun, and they're going to do lots of interviews and kind of check on all of us. And anybody that they didn't interview as part of the Fourth and Prater project, they're going to be interviewing this project. So it'll be a good activity, and that kind of somewhat starts next week with the interviews, and then it will really take full steam in the middle of November. And with that, I can answer any questions that you guys have.
Okay, questions or comments?
Want to
Ms. Jordan?
know more about.
Thank you very much. Continue to be impressed with the work going on Virginia Street. I think one of the benefits, certainly going south on Virginia Street, is that it slows you down. Great for pedestrians. There's a lot of stuff going on, though, so it's almost hard for pedestrians to even go across. There's so much construction activity and cones. But because you slow down, you're noticing all the businesses that otherwise you might have just driven by at a faster pace. I did notice, particularly the South Virginia shopping center that you were talking about. I'm glad to hear we're going to put some focus further south, which I think is a really good thing. But it does kind of force you to notice maybe businesses you didn't see previously and make a point to frequent those. The one I'm concerned about is the northbound. I don't know if there's any way we can augment how do you access the businesses coming northbound on Virginia, and the easiest places to park. We know coming up Wells and kind of accessing that side, or Center Street once you get, but Plum, people seem to be a little confused when they hit Plum coming north on Virginia. It looks like it's almost totally shut down. So people kind of take a right on Plum, and I don't know that they're weaving their way back or how that's happening. So I don't know how we augment the northbound access. But the thing I continue to hear is that it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be, and that people are being really good about frequenting the businesses and being loyal to them to help them survive through this process, which has been pretty incredible, and very thankful for everybody working together to make it happen. So good job.
Yeah, we'll totally look at the northbound kind of routing and see if there's easy things that we can do to help just get that more noticeable and look open.
Yeah, great, thank you.
You could put a sign up, "Street open during construction." That'll probably work right in that corner.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. McKenzie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the same lines, again, we've done a much better job on this project than we did on the 4th Street project in making sure we had accessibility to businesses. And while we get a few complaints from businesses that aren't getting the level of business that they think they ought to be getting, in general, the businesses are happy that, if not, they're not happy. They're surprised that they're getting as much as they're getting. There was an expectation that this was going to look like 4th Street, and they're pretty amazed that it isn't. The Plum Street, or the Plum there, one of the things that isn't clear when you're coming north on Virginia is that if you stay in the left lane and go across the plumb lane, that you get onto Wells and that's your detour. So just signage right there might clarify that northbound Virginia Street traffic gets in that lane and for detour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. Jordan?
Thank you very much. I did want to also give a shout out to Reno Police Department. One of the things that occurred with the break-ins that we were experiencing, I think as soon as we heard about it, I know some businesses in Midtown reached out to me to say, hey, there's starting to be a rash of some burglaries going on. We immediately got RPD involved, and RPD started doing some undercover work, which we couldn't relay to the public because it was undercover, and they did catch one burglar, but there was an association with another one or two, and they didn't want to come out and say, we've got one, because they were trying to use the one to get the other few. And so it seemed like maybe for a few days that nothing was happening, but it was very much happening. And but shout out to RPD, they did an excellent job. And hopefully this will mitigate some of those issues going on with regards to burglaries.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you for the report. Looking for a motion to accept the report. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. 6.3, acknowledge receipt of the Regional Intersection Improvement Program. Blaine, come on down. Get some coffee.
Thank you. Blaine Peterson, RTC Project Manager. I'm giving an update on our Regional Intersection and ITS Improvement Program. The 2040 Regional Plan includes pavement preservation, ADA accessibility improvements, pedestrian and bicycle facility improvements, and what my update is on today, traffic signal, ITS operations, and intersections. This map shows our traffic signal timing program. We have over 400 signals in the region, and the different colored dots just show when we've done the different groupings for the traffic signal timing. Oops. Traffic signal timing program reviews all the region's traffic signals on a 3-year cycle to optimize the signal timing. Over the past 11 years, we've spent approximately $1.7 million on signal timing. The next portion is intelligent transportation systems. This map shows our recent project. We've completed work on North Virginia Street, Prater Way, McCarran from Gregg to Bering. The ITS projects include communication infrastructures such as fiber optic and radios, as well as LiDAR, which is light imaging detection and ranging, video camera, radar, or other detection methods. Over the past couple of years, we've spent about $3.4 million, or included in that is an upcoming project as well. We've also funded some research with UNR for LiDAR. Finally, the traffic engineering projects. This is a flowchart kind of illustrating the process that we select projects on. Every year, the local agencies request projects, which if traffic signals are requested, we include a review of the signal warrants. After that, we establish priorities at our TOMS meeting, which is Traffic Operations Management. And the TOMS includes local traffic engineers from Reno Sparks and includes NDOT staff as well. After that, we identify the availability for funding. And then once the budget is approved, we engage consultant for design. If right-of-way is needed, we'll acquire that and then move on to construction. T-spot projects could include traffic signals, additional turn lanes, battery backup systems, which are designed to keep the traffic signal running on a short-term basis in case of a power outage. Some of the projects included in T-spot 7 is the traffic signal at Calle de la Plata, which I'm happy to report will be turned on tomorrow at 9 a.m. We also installed a new traffic signal at Prater and Lillard. This map shows the TE spot projects that are currently under construction, the yellow dots. and our TE spot locations, which are currently under design. TE Spot 8 includes an evaluation of a traffic signal at Charlins and Mayan, new traffic signal at Red Rock and Silver Lake, and Evans and Enterprise, flashing yellow arrows at Keystone and 7th, Lincoln at Marina Gateway, McCarran at Neal, and Mill at Kerman. We're also designing an increased left turn storage for McCarran westbound at US 395 southbound on-ramp. Over the past 7 years, we've spent approximately $10.5 million on intersection improvements.
Ms. Jordan?
Oh, sure. Will you go back? One more, sorry.
Oh, one more.
The very top one, the Charlins at Mayan, currently under design. How long does it take to design?
We're evaluating the signal at Charlins and Mayan currently. So we'll make sure it meets the warrants,
Okay.
and then if it does, construction most likely would be next year.
Okay, thank you.
The future funding that we're hoping for the TE Spot improvement projects is approximately $3 million. ITS projects, $1.5 million, which would include additional research with UNR for LiDAR. That would expand the program on Virginia Street, close to UNR, and $500,000 in the signal timing project. Other intersection projects that we know about that aren't necessarily funded by RTC is double R at Lauren. Renown has completed the design for the traffic signal, and the signal could be constructed with a future Renown project. There's also a signal at Sun Valley at Highland Ranch. Washoe County School District is installing a new signal as a part of Desert Skies Middle School. Sparks at Kylie Ranch. Washoe County School District is also installing a new signal at Floor Sky Ranch Middle School. And then we've also been requested to evaluate a signal at Veterans and Long Meadow. We hear there's a proposed elementary school going in. The final one is Pyramid at Egyptian, and we're working with NDOT staff to see if that's a candidate for a traffic signal. And that's it. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Mr. Lucy?
Thank you. Mr. Peterson, in regards to these traffic signals, now I'm looking at some of these future intersection projects we have listed here. You've got Sparks at Ion, Wingfield Hills, and David Allen, South Meadows, Wilbur May, Steamboat. What's the timeline? How many we've got? It looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects this year in the fiscal year for the budget. Is that correct? For construction?
Currently under construction for TE Spot 7. There's approximately 10 different locations. TE Spot 8 will have 2 new traffic signals for sure at Red Rock and Silver Lake and Evans and Enterprise. And the third one we're evaluating at Charlins and Mayan.
Roughly what's the cost? What are we spending on an intersection? What's the,
A
just
rough
an
cost
average?
for traffic signal is about $550,000.
Okay, 550,000.
It's doubled. It's doubled over a few years ago.
Yeah, it's gotten a little bit more expensive. The other thing I have a question about is, you were talking to Commissioner Jardin's discussion about evaluating the signal up at Charlins. Do we currently evaluate based on today's standards when we do that, when we identify if it qualifies for a signal, or do we take into account any type of future growth or growth in the area? How do we evaluate those signals?
We evaluate on the current levels. We do a traffic study, but sometimes, for example, the pyramid at Calle de la Plata, that didn't quite meet warrants, but future development was anticipated, so then it was close. So when it's close, we go ahead and program that for traffic signals.
So we can be a little bit more discretionary in regards to future growth in the area and need, because that sounds a little retroactive for me in regards to we're waiting till a problem to install a light when we know there's potentially one coming. And I know we've seen that quite often in the North Valleys, up in the Stead area. We waited significantly too long to put lights in there. especially on North Virginia, we waited too long to put lights in there before there was a problem already. So I think that if we have these discussions about improving our intersections and continue, I think that needs to be part of that discussion, is that future growth. And I think that should be a little bit more heavily weighted in regards to our decisions as it pertains to those intersection improvements, because we're asking for accidents to happen before we decide to put a light in, or if there's warrants for it. And I don't think we should wait for a warrant so far as we should be a little bit more proactive in saying that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, as part of that, Washington County School District is installing those traffic signals based on future development, the schools.
Right.
Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that in North Virginia Street's a perfect example of this is one of the things that a lot of times plays in more than the amount of traffic, it's the way that traffic travels. And we get a lot of intersections and stretches of road that traffic thinks it's a freeway. And so they don't recognize hazards quite as clearly as somebody that was driving on a local street. So do we figure in the way that people are driving that through those intersections when we decide whether an intersection meets warrants?
Yeah, as a part of the traffic study, we determine which way people are going. I'm not sure if that.
It's not the direction they're going, it's the way they're going. It's the attitude the drivers have on that street. Because one of the things that a stoplight does is slows traffic down. It takes control of traffic, where if you've got an open street, even with four-way stop signs, a lot of times you'll have people blow through four-way stop signs because they're in too big a hurry to follow traffic rules. But the stoplight tends to draw their attention and it stops traffic, and that slows the flow of traffic down, makes the roadway safer. So the manner that the drivers are driving the road, do we take that into consideration? How they're traveling with the speed limit, how they're recognizing crosswalks, which was the issue at North Virginia Street, is people just ignored the crosswalk. Even with the flashing crosswalk lights, they ignored it. And which really raised that to a level where we needed one, even though it didn't meet the warrants.
It's difficult to quantify how people are driving, but we fall back on kind of the federal guidelines. There's such a demand for traffic signals that we have to prioritize based on certain factors.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you for the report. Looking for a motion to accept the report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. 7.1, receive a presentation from the Nevada Department of Transportation on major transportation studies and projects, including the One Nevada Plan, I-11 Northern Nevada, alternatives analysis, and the Spaghetti Bowl. Sandra and Kevin, the tag team. Welcome.
Thank you. Actually, it's going to be me and Nick.
Okay.
Sandra Rosenberg, Assistant Director for Planning at NDOT, and I have with me Nick Johnson, our Chief of Project Management. So I'm going to cover the planning activities. He's going to cover the projects. And we both kind of shrunk these presentations, so we're happy to take questions either as we go or at the end. So the One Nevada Transportation Plan, that's our statewide long-range plan that's required federally, but we wanted to expand that a little bit. So a little bit about the background. It does meet the federal long-range transportation plan requirements and enhances our current process. It's a 20-plus year plan that develops strategies for the entire state in conjunction with other agencies. So we did spend a lot of time looking at the MPOs, including RTC of Washoe County, in terms of what your goal areas are, because we want to make sure we're consistent with that. Historically, our long-range plan has been a policy document, but this one focuses more on performance and developing a process for a more robust, transparent prioritization process. So a little bit about the agency engagement. We did, as I mentioned, we work with the MPOs, but a number of other organizations as well. We have a steering committee, which is the Transportation Planning Advisory Committee, formerly the STAC. It's been kind of rebranded to help us with this new process, focus on planning and process. And that is, there's representatives from a number of state and federal agencies on that organization. In addition, the Technical Advisory Committee, which is we used what we call the PEG, the Planning Executive Group, and that is myself, Federal Highways, and the planning managers from all 4 MPOs. And then we also did quite a bit of public outreach, public surveys, public meetings. Our One Nevada Transportation Plan goals, again, consistent with your goals in this organization as well: enhance safety, preserve infrastructure, optimize mobility, transform economies, foster sustainability, and connect communities. And as part of the performance-based planning process, we want to align our project planning with the goal areas, coordinate project planning and prioritization in a unified process within NDOT. So we spend a lot of time working across the department as well, rather than planning doing its thing and then, engineering and other parts of the organization having different priorities. We really wanted a consensus about our priorities and goal areas within the department. Understand the effective program decisions we'll have on statewide performance measures. As you know, it's a new federal requirement that we have certain measures that we report, and we want to make sure that's integrated into our process, while maintaining the flexibility for emerging needs. Coordinate other statewide and local agency transportation plans into a unified transportation vision for Nevada. This is just the beginning. We do have a plan document out there for public review. It's really the foundation. It's really kind of changing the way we work with other organizations, the way we prioritize our processes and projects and programs. So we've built the initial framework process tools, identified the data we have, the data we need, and we have the plan out there right now for review. We're hoping to bring it to our board in November. We're going to continue to work to enhance those data, tools, and processes across the department, using it, across the department in various different fields and areas, to eventually harmonize and unify that across NDOT, and hopefully use it with all of our divisions, as well as work with the MPOs to have a consistent prioritization process based on performance. So the key areas moving forward to enhance this process: greater use of technology, emphasis on multimodal considerations. That was something we really struggled with. A lot of our the performance metrics, the data that NDOT has, are very highway focused, and we know there's a need to better enhance those multimodal considerations so that those types of projects could compete fairly. So we're working on gathering that data. Shift to performance and outcome-based decision-making process for prioritizing projects. Develop criteria and data to better evaluate those needs. Investigate new and innovative funding sources. That's always an issue, and relying primarily on gas taxes is not going to help us get to satisfactorily meeting all of those goal areas. Continue robust statewide participation to unify information sharing and decision-making. So as I mentioned, I took a lot of the slides out because we have a lot to cover today, but we do have the document for public review, public comment until October 28th at onenevadaplan.com. There's also a number of background resources there as well, so you can see how we got where we got and our plan going forward to enhance this process. So I'm going to roll right into I-11 because, like I said, we have a lot to cover. So I-11 Northern Nevada Alternatives Analysis, Planning and Environmental Linkages. It's a long title, but there's a purpose for that. Big picture, the study goals is to advance I-11 through a federally recognized collaborative process to identify the most promising potential corridors. As you know, there's a number of corridors that were being considered in Northern Nevada. We wanted to help narrow those down to the ones that really make a lot of sense to further our effort. Document issues and opportunities to inform and streamline future NEPA processes. This is, we started to address or identify some of the potential environmental constraints, but this is not a NEPA process. It's a process that's documented to help fulfill that at a later date. Formulate a plan to advance I-11 over the next 10 to 20 years and prepare Nevada with identified corridors for preservation should a federal lands bill advance. So we started with our initial corridors for consideration and developed a set of evaluation criteria. The evaluation criteria is primarily based on almost exactly the same as the prior study we did, the I-11 and Intermountain West Corridor study. So those of you who are there here then remember that. So those are the criteria on the right, certainly capacity, travel times and speeds, economic vitality, environmental sustainability, community acceptance. I'm not going to read through all of those, but those are the criteria we evaluated. The maps on the left show that the segments, the corridors that we were considering initially, we separated out into segment A and B. Segment A really from the outskirts of Las Vegas to Tonopah. There really aren't any alternatives. It's really along the 95 corridor. It's very constrained there. And then a number of corridor alternatives north of there. So we held 6 community meetings with over 400 attendees back in March. And the goal of that was really to look at those, the criteria, or the criteria and the corridors for consideration. And then we went back out in July and August with 7 meetings, over 300 attendees, to really look at the evaluation, so how it was done. And in between those meetings, we did add another alternative based on public feedback that was evaluated along with the others. So the consistent topics we heard during that outreach, corridor alternative concerns, what happens in my town, and what happens north of I-80. So to address those second 2 bullets, we did develop some documentation to show kind of what would happen in the towns along the way. We're going to continue to outreach in some of those towns in terms of consideration of, you know, a big highway through your town versus bypasses and those types of considerations. And then what happens north of I-80, we also developed a paper to talk about potential options north of I-80. So the results of the evaluation, those wheels show the different criteria that we mentioned. Red, least favorable, green, most favorable, and A1, B2, and B3 kind of rose to the top for further consideration. The others had several unfavorable or least favorable reviews on those criteria, so we're not recommending those be further evaluated for I-11. So we think corridor A1, B2, and B3 provide an excellent future link to I-80, complementing the existing facilities, in some cases just enhancing the existing facilities. These corridor recommendations will help state and local communities supplement the economic development plans that target community investment. So we really want to work with the communities along the way so we have a consistent plan for this corridor as we move forward. Next steps, this document is also open for public comment right now through November 8th. And then we'll be bringing it to the State Transportation Board in December, and then for federal highway approval. And that's really for the Pell documentation. That's the planning and environment linkages. That's the document that helps us move these decisions into the NEPA process at a future date. And with that, I can either hand it right over to Nick, or we can take questions at this time, whatever the board would, or the
Any
commission would
questions at
prefer.
this time from the board? Okay, Nick.
Good morning, board members. For the record, Nick Johnson, NDOT Project Management. Yes, please. There we go. Well, all right, and I'll give you guys just a quick update today on some of the status of our major projects, where we're at with Spaghetti Bowl and our first phase, and then what's planned here in the future. So let's talk about Spaghetti Bowl, the timeline here and status. Now, if you could recall, originally, we set out to complete this NEPA in 3.5 years. Knock on wood, but if everything goes well, we'll be done in less than 2.5 years. We're shooting to have it completely wrapped up by next summer, if we will. So what you see here is just a timeline over the past few months, and then leading into next year. We got the first draft and the draft EIS out to all the agencies in July, got comments back, updated that, and then we're looking to release that to the public and for public comment here in about mid-November. And then in December, tentatively scheduled right now, December 12th is our public hearing for that draft EIS, and I have some details on that here in just a minute. And then, as I mentioned earlier, shooting for June to try to wrap this thing up and move on with the project. So during this process, we've met with many folks in the community. I think we're pushing about 80 total stakeholder meetings to date to really understand what everybody's needs are in the community and to help come to resolution, or at least get a sense of which one of these alternatives really makes the most sense. So what you see here is just a very subjective form about how each of the alternatives have different impacts to the community, as well as how other agencies and the community view this. So we use this with all the agencies here in the area to get their perspective on it, as well as ours with all the technical data that we have. And in this process, one of the things that has helped us to accelerate is that when we put this draft EIS out, we at this time will make a recommendation to Federal Highways as to what alternative we recommend. So if you can look there by the colors, green is good. In the draft EIS, you will see that alternative 2 is our recommendation. So for any of those who want to go out and see these different alternatives, you can go to our website at n.spaghettibowl.com, and we have all that information there. So as I mentioned, the public hearing in December, it'll be at the Reno Sparks Convention Center from about 3 to 7 o'clock. We're going to do 2 presentations so that we give everybody the opportunity to come out and hear about what we found, what the alternatives are, and why we're making the recommendation that we are. And as I also mentioned, when we get this draft out in mid-November, we'll give a long comment period to the community and then wrap it up by the end of the year so we can get all the comments in, and then we can start working towards that final EIS and get the record of decision this summer. So in the spirit of trying to keep things moving along and accelerated, we've started the procurement for the first phase of the Spaghetti Bowl project, as we refer to the Spaghetti Bowl Express. And as many of you know, that will be widening the east to southbound ramps to 2 lanes, continuing another general purpose lane through the Spaghetti Bowl, 3 through lanes, and continue that south down to Plum Villanova interchange. And to go along with that, we'll be making modifications to the Glendale and Mill Street interchanges there. So really completing that southbound section.
Nick, when is this part of the project going to start? After we get the EIS?
Correct.
Okay. And this is the 150 million we're talking about?
Correct.
Okay.
So
give me a time frame.
Here we go, right
Okay.
here. Great segue
Sorry
to this
about
slide.
that.
No worries. So we started working on this. We put the RFQ out to get the qualifications in May. We have 4 design-build teams that we've shortlisted. We just released the final RFP to those teams. And so over the course between now and next spring, we'll give them time to put their proposals together. We'll be evaluating those proposals. And then the goal is right after we get the record of decision for the EIS, we can turn around and award this contract to that successful team, and most likely start construction in early 2020. I mean, there could be some possibilities at the end of the year, but I would imagine right after the first of the year there in 2020, they can get going with the goal to try to get this done in 2 construction seasons. Okay, so moving on to the North Valleys. We currently have a pavement rehabilitation project going on from the Spaghetti Bowl north to the McCarran-Clear Acre interchange. That should be wrapping up here shortly this fall. One of the improvements that we have heard about from many, good and bad, is restriping this Clear Acre on-ramp into its own lane. Previously to this, it kind of got shoved right into that traffic coming down the hill. So to make things a little safer, bringing those folks into their own lane, and then having McCarran merge with that traffic as they head south towards Spaghetti Bowl. Now, looking ahead to the future, we're currently underway with design, and as Director Malfabaum mentioned earlier, we just put an RFP out to supplement some of our engineering support, but to widen 395 from the Clear Acre McCarran interchange north to Lemon Drive. And there's a number of different improvements in there. Another southbound lane and auxiliary lanes in both directions there. There'll be some bridge work with walls and such, and we anticipate wrapping that effort up at the end of 2021 and starting construction in 2022. And then moving out east on I-80, a couple efforts going on there. First, we were looking at a corridor study. Really what we're doing here is looking at different ways that we can get people from Washoe County, or I guess from the Reno Sparks, Washoe County area out to the Tri-Center there. So looking at a number of different options, and then, really using what Sandra just presented in goals and criteria, and kind of see how all of those different alternatives stack up to each other, or stack up against each other. So we're going to wrap it, or at least have a draft of that analysis and list here by the end of the year to look at. And then a smaller project that we're doing right now, just to help with some of the operations and safety out there at the USA Parkway interchanges, adding a signal there on the north side of the interchange, and then constructing auxiliary lanes on the west side of the interchange. So it gives folks some more room to get off when they're headed out to USA Parkway, and then especially with the trucks headed westbound, get up to speed before they enter the 2 lanes on I-80 there. It's about a $7.5 million project. We just awarded it and anticipate starting construction in the spring. So as Sandra mentioned, we tried to keep it kind of short and sweet today, so I'll open it up for any questions.
Appreciate that. Any questions, comments? Mr. McKenzie?
So I thought we were able to do that express without a study, without the EIS study.
We possibly could. It does create some complications with the EIS. So in order just to minimize our risk and moving forward, we just kept them all together. And the reality of it is, even if we did it as a CE with some of the other efforts that we'd have to do, you're talking a couple months difference between award. So, when you're looking at the bigger picture of getting the EIS done with this project, it made a little more sense just to keep that award out a couple months and then just get the record of decision.
Okay, and then how long behind the express project will we be actually starting on the spaghetti bowl itself?
Well, I think when we think of the physical spaghetti bowl, there's going to be bits and pieces that are going to be part of that with all the different phases of the overall EIS project. So what you'll see is, for example, on this one, we're working on the east to southbound ramp, and another through lane through the spaghetti bowl will help with that. If you looked at I-80 on the east side, by the Nugget, part of that would include a couple of ramps. When you do the section from the spaghetti bowl north to McCarran, that's going to include a couple of the ramps. If you do the section on the west side, that'll include a couple of them. So really where it makes sense in terms of phasings and logistics and right-of-way and things like that, bits and pieces will be done with every phase.
Okay.
Ms. Jordan?
Thank you very much. Do we have any current crash data on the 80 east to
We
southbound?
do. I don't know it off the top of my head, but we could certainly get you that.
Is there any way somebody could get that to me? I think this is a significant project that I think everybody kind of glossed over for a while, because it just seems like, stuff takes a long time. But I think reminding everybody, as I understand it, this is the highest crash area in our region. And to confirm that and maybe get some numbers associated with it. I know we got something at one point that talked about the economic impacts of the wrecks, not to mention the time of our first responders that have to respond to all of those wrecks, just in this one area. And I think maybe you're not getting enough credit for how quickly you guys are moving this along and how great this is going to be when it's done. So if I could get that from somebody, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make a few comments, just in response to Commissioner McKenzie's question. I think that one of the things that we want to know is, will this issue of federal funding be addressed as they reauthorize the Surface Transportation Bill, currently known as the FAST Act? One of the things they had in it was a baked-in rescission or pullback of federal funds in 2020. That's a presidential election year. That's a big issue, and they don't, in my opinion, they don't want to have a big rescission of federal funds in the same year that there's that election. But I think that there's some opportunities out there. I know that some of the people, Chairman Schuster particularly, has been looking at raising federal gas taxes as a solution and proposing that in a conceptual bill. The other thing is that I wanted to thank the RTC for the efforts. As Nick said, getting this done in 2.5 years, I looked up what's the average for an environmental impact statement. It's nearly 4 years. So they've done a monumental job, but we couldn't have done it without the efforts of Federal Highway Administration locally and the RTC of Washoe County, getting it into your plan quickly and even putting some of your funding towards the project is going to help us immensely. It is based on bonding, which we're just using bonding capacity that's available to the state, and we have a kind of a conservative bonding policy, so it's not going to affect us financially. I believe it's a reasonable approach to delivering the project quickly. It's just, as far as the future phases, Nick, if you could clarify, will you have the kind of the phases broken out in final EIS?
Very high level. And, I think as we move forward after this draft period, we'll get into more details of that. But I believe they're broken out as the section from the Spaghetti Bowl, or I think the second phase, or as is the Spaghetti Bowl in Sparks through the viaduct or by the Nugget there to McCarran. I want to say the third one is, and I could be wrong on this, is the northern section there from the Spaghetti Bowl up to Clearacre McCarran. Then the west side of the Spaghetti Bowl between downtown Reno and the Spaghetti Bowl, and then some of the areas down south by Plum Lane down to Moana and Virginia Street there with the freeway itself. So we still have some room, a lot of work to do on those, but I think what's important for everybody to understand is that it's not going to be built in one shot, and it's going to have to be built over a number of years in phases, just because of the sheer magnitude of the project.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Nick, thank you. Sandra, we're done? Yes. Okay, looking for a motion. No action required. I didn't want to kick you out if you weren't done. Okay, 8.1, legal issues. Dale? None for the board, okay. I'll open up the public comment period. Anybody wishing to speak at this time? Seeing no, we'll bring it back to the commission. Member items. Anything? Okay, this is the fastest meeting we've had in a long time, so appreciate it. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you.